Captain Sarah Chen had been staring at the strange signal for 3 hours straight, her coffee long cold and her eyes burning from the screen's blue glow. The Defiant, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, hummed quietly around her as she sat in the communications bay, trying to make sense of what her instruments were telling her. "Computer, run Analysis Protocol 7 again," she muttered, rubbing her temples. The AI's voice filled the small room with its usual calm precision. "Analysis complete. Signal bears 97.3% probability of being artificially generated. Origin, Kepler 442b system, approximately 1,200 light-years from Earth. Signal strength suggests extreme power output." Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Humanity had been alone in the universe for as long as they'd been looking up at the stars. The discovery of faster-than-light travel just 50 years ago had opened up new possibilities, but every world they'd visited had been empty of intelligent life. Now, suddenly, they were picking up what could only be described as a distress signal. "Captain Chen, to the bridge," came the voice of her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez, through the ship's intercom. "We've got something you need to see." Sarah made her way through the corridors of the Defiant, nodding to crew members as she passed. The ship was humanity's pride and joy, a marvel of engineering that represented 20 years of international cooperation. Its crew of 200 was hand-picked from the best and brightest Earth had to offer, and they'd been exploring the galaxy for 3 years now, mapping systems and cataloging worlds. The bridge was a hive of activity when Sarah arrived. Officers hunched over their stations, faces illuminated by the glow of their displays. The main screen showed a tactical readout of the Kepler 442b system, with a pulsing red dot marking the source of the signal. "Report," Sarah said, settling into her captain's chair. Marcus turned to face her, his expression grave. "The signal's getting stronger, Captain. Whatever's broadcasting it is putting out more power than we've ever seen. But there's something else." He paused, glancing at the communications officer. "Lieutenant Park, show the captain what we found." Lieutenant Jennifer Park, the ship's chief communications officer, pulled up a new display. "We've been analyzing the signal structure, Captain. It's not random. There's a pattern, a mathematical sequence that repeats every 47 seconds. Sarah studied the waveform pattern on the screen. Even without formal training in xenolinguistics, she could see the deliberate structure. "It's trying to communicate." "That's what we think too," Marcus said. "But there's more. The signal is degrading. Whatever's sending it, it's getting weaker." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In all their years of wondering if they were alone in the universe, humanity had never seriously considered what they would do if they found someone who needed help. The protocols they developed were all about first contact, peaceful meetings, and diplomatic exchanges. No one had planned for a rescue mission. "How long until we reach the system?" Sarah asked. "At maximum warp, 14 hours, replied the navigation officer, Ensign James Wu. Sarah stared at the pulsing signal on the screen. 14 hours. Would that be enough time? And what would they find when they got there? The signal could be coming from a ship in distress, or a dying world, or something they couldn't even imagine. "Take us there," she decided. Maximum warp. As the Defiant jumped to faster-than-light speed, Sarah found herself thinking about Earth. Humanity had always been survivors. They'd clawed their way up from primitive hunters to space explorers, surviving ice ages, plagues, wars, and countless other disasters. Earth itself was what the galactic community would later call a death world, a planet so hostile that only the strongest, most adaptable species could survive there. But Sarah didn't know that yet. She didn't know that most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds with gentle climates, low gravity, and minimal predators. She didn't know that the average galactic citizen would find Earth's crushing gravity, violent weather, and aggressive wildlife absolutely terrifying. All she knew was that someone, somewhere, was calling for help. The journey to Kepler 442b gave the crew time to prepare. The science team, led by Dr. Elena Vasquez, worked around the clock to analyze the signal and develop translation protocols. The engineering team, under Chief Engineer Tom Bradley, made sure the ship systems were running at peak efficiency. The security team, headed by Commander Lisa Jackson, prepared for any possible threats they might encounter. But as they approached the system, it became clear that they weren't dealing with a simple rescue mission. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Park, her voice tense with excitement. "I'm detecting multiple signals now. Different patterns, different power levels. It's like a conversation." Sarah moved to the communications station, studying the displays. The original distress signal was still there, but now it was accompanied by at least 6 other distinct transmissions. Some were stronger, some weaker, but all bore the same mathematical precision that marked them as artificial. "Multiple species?" Sarah asked. "That's what it looks like," Park replied. "But Captain, the distress signal is definitely the weakest. Whatever's sending it, it's running out of power fast." The system came into view on the main screen, and Sarah gasped. Kepler 442b was a beautiful blue-green world, not unlike Earth, but it wasn't alone. 3 massive structures hung in orbit around the planet, ships, but unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. They were organic-looking, with flowing curves and what appeared to be living surfaces. The largest was easily 10 kilometers long. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "They're beautiful." But even as she spoke, it was clear that one of the ships was in trouble. Its bioluminescent patterns were flickering irregularly, and debris was trailing from its hull. The distress signal was definitely coming from there. "Captain," came the voice of the tactical officer, "I'm reading energy weapons fire. 2 of the ships are attacking the 3rd. Sarah's blood ran cold. They hadn't just stumbled upon a rescue situation, they'd walked into the middle of a war. "Red alert," she ordered. "All hands to battle stations. Shields up." The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as the crew prepared for potential combat. Sarah had to make a decision that would change the course of galactic history, though she had no way of knowing it at the time. "Hail the attacking ships," she ordered. Lieutenant Park worked frantically at her station. "No response, Captain. They're ignoring us." Sarah watched as another volley of energy weapons struck the damaged ship. Its distress signal was getting weaker by the minute. Whatever was happening here, innocent beings were dying. "Captain," said Marcus quietly, "we don't know who's right and who's wrong here. For all we know, the ship we want to help could be the aggressor." Sarah knew he was right. But she also knew that someone had called for help, and that call had brought them across 1,200 light-years of space. In her gut, she felt that whoever was sending that distress signal was in real trouble. "Tactical, target the weapons systems of the attacking ships," she ordered. "Fire a warning shot across their bows." "Captain," Commander Jackson protested, "we're outnumbered and outgunned." "Those ships are massive." "Warning shot only," Sarah repeated. "Let's see if we can get their attention." The Defiance pulse cannons lit up space, sending bright blue energy bolts across the paths of the attacking ships. The effect was immediate, both vessels stopped firing and turned toward the human ship. "Now we have their attention," Sarah muttered. "All stop. Broadcast on all frequencies." Lieutenant Park nodded. "You're on, Captain." Sarah took a deep breath. She was about to make humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, and she was doing it in the middle of a battle. Not exactly how the diplomats had imagined it would happen. "This is Captain Sarah Chin of the Earth vessel Defiant," she began. "We received a distress signal from this system. We are a peaceful exploration vessel, but we will not stand by and watch the destruction of those who called for help. Cease your attack immediately." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, Lieutenant Park's face lit up with amazement. "Captain, I'm receiving a response. It's in English." The voice that came through the speakers was melodious, almost musical, but with an underlying tone of authority that made Sarah's spine straighten. "Earth vessel Defiant, this is Fleet Commander Zale of the Hegemon Collective. You are interfering in a lawful enforcement action. The vessel you seek to protect has violated the Galactic Accords and is marked for destruction. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Sarah felt her heart racing. The Galactic Accords? There was an entire galactic civilization out there, with laws and governments and fleets of ships. Humanity had been so focused on finding any life at all that they'd never considered they might be entering a complex political situation. But the distress signal was still pulsing weakly from the damaged ship. "Fleet Commander Zale," Sarah replied, "we are not familiar with your galactic accords. We come from a world that has had no contact with galactic civilization. But we received a distress call, and we cannot ignore it. What crime has this vessel committed?" There was another pause, and Sarah could almost feel the alien commander's surprise through the communication system. "You claim to be from an uncontacted world?" Zale's voice carried a note of disbelief. "That is impossible. All worlds capable of faster-than-light travel are members of the Galactic Accords." "Well, apparently not all of them," Sarah replied dryly. "Now, about that ship you're attacking." Before Zale could respond, a new voice crackled through the speakers. This one was weaker, filled with pain and desperation, but somehow more familiar to Sarah's ears. "Earth vessel, this is Captain Krex of the exploration ship Wanderer. We are researchers from the Vrixian Republic. We discovered evidence of massive corruption within the Hegemon Collective's leadership. When we tried to report it, they declared us criminals and sentenced us to death. We are not warriors, we are scientists. Please, if you have any compassion, do not let them destroy us." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Political corruption, scientists on the run, summary execution, it was a story as old as humanity itself. But now it was playing out on a galactic stage. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "we're in way over our heads here." Sarah knew he was right. The Defiant was just one ship, facing two massive alien vessels with technology they didn't understand. But she also knew that if they walked away now, they'd be abandoning innocent beings to die. "Fleet Commander Zale," she said into the communicator, "we request that you allow us to take the Wanderer and its crew under our protection. We will investigate their claims and ensure that justice is served." Zale's response was immediate and cold. "You are not members of the Galactic Accords. You have no authority here. Withdraw now, or you will be destroyed along with the criminals you seek to protect." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She saw fear there, but also determination. They were 1,200 light-years from home, facing impossible odds, but they were still human. And humans didn't abandon people in need. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "We're about to engage two alien vessels in combat to protect a third. The odds are not in our favor, but we're not going to let innocent beings die on our watch. This is what we trained for, not exactly this situation, but the principle remains the same. We are explorers, but we are also protectors. Today, we represent all of humanity. Let's make our species proud." Sarah turned to her tactical officer. "Target the weapons systems of the lead Hegemon ship. Full power." "Captain," Commander Jackson said, "our weapons are designed for asteroid mining and basic defense." "Against ships that size?" "I know," Sarah replied. "But we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to buy time. Maybe we can disable their weapons long enough for the Wanderer to escape." The Defiant opened fire, its pulse cannons lighting up space as they struck the massive Hegemon vessel. The alien ship's shields flared, absorbing most of the energy, but Sarah could see fluctuations in their power grid. "Their shields are strong, but not invincible," reported Jackson. "If we concentrate fire on one section." The Hegemon ships responded immediately, their own weapons, elegant energy beams that seemed to bend space itself, striking the Defiant's shields. The human ship shuddered under the impact, but held together. "Shield strength at 78%, called out the engineering officer. "But Captain, those weapons are like nothing we've ever seen. A few more hits like that and we're in trouble." Sarah gritted her teeth. The Defiant was faster and more maneuverable than the alien ships, but it was also much smaller and less heavily armed. This was going to be a battle of David versus Goliath, except David was outnumbered 2-1. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Keep us moving. Target their weapon emplacements." What followed was a deadly dance among the stars. The Defiant darted between the massive hegemon ships, its weapons striking at their gunports and shield generators. The alien vessels tried to track the smaller ship, but their size worked against them. They were too slow to keep up with the human vessel's movements. But Sarah knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Defiant's weapons were gradually wearing down the hegemon ship's shields, but their own were failing faster. And they were running out of room to maneuver. Captain, Lieutenant Park called out, "I'm receiving a message from the Wanderer. They're saying they've restored partial power to their engines. They can escape if we can give them 2 more minutes." 2 minutes. Sarah looked at her tactical display. At the current rate of damage, the Defiant would be dead in the water in 90 seconds. "Engineering, can you give me more power to the shields?" she asked. "I'm already pushing the engines past their safety limits," came the reply from Chief Bradley. "Any more and we risk a core breach." Sarah made a decision that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. Instead of trying to protect her ship, she ordered a full-scale assault on the hegemon vessels. "All power to weapons," she commanded. "Ignore the shields. We're going to hit them with everything we've got." The Defiant charged directly at the larger of the 2 hegemon ships, its weapons blazing. The alien vessel's return fire struck the human ship's hull directly, tearing through armor and sending shockwaves through the corridors. But Sarah's gamble paid off. The concentrated fire from the Defiant finally overwhelmed a section of the hegemon ship's shields, and the human weapons struck home. The alien vessel lurched as explosions blossomed along its hull. Its weapons went silent, and it began to drift. "One down," Sarah said grimly, then turned to the tactical officer. "Status on the second ship?" "They're moving to intercept the Wanderer," Jackson reported. "The Vrixian ship is trying to escape, but they're not going to make it." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Ramming speed. Target their engines." "Captain, no." Marcus protested. "We'll be destroyed." "Maybe," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "But the Wanderer will escape. And maybe, just maybe, the truth about this corruption will get out." The Defiant accelerated toward the second hegemon ship, its hull groaning under the stress. The alien vessel turned its weapons on the approaching human ship, but Sarah had timed it perfectly. They were too close for the larger ship to bring its main guns to bear. At the last second, Sarah ordered, "All hands, brace for impact." The Defiant struck the hegemon ship's engine section with the force of a small asteroid. The collision tore through both vessels, sending debris spinning through space. The alien ship's engines went dark, and it began to drift helplessly. But the Defiant had paid a heavy price. The ship's hull was breached in multiple places, and power was failing throughout the vessel. Sarah could hear the emergency klaxons blaring, could feel the ship dying around her. "Captain," Lieutenant Park called out, her voice shaking, "the Wanderer is clear. They're requesting permission to come alongside and assist." Sarah smiled, despite the blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. "Permission granted." "And Lieutenant?" "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we made contact. Tell them we're not alone." What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. The Wanderer, despite being heavily damaged itself, moved alongside the crippled Defiant and began emergency repairs. The Vrixian crew, led by Captain Krex, worked side by side with the humans to stabilize both ships. Captain Krex was unlike anything the humans had ever imagined. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted color with his emotions, he was nevertheless remarkably similar to humans in his dedication to science and his sense of justice. The Vrixians, it turned out, were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and they had been fighting corruption and injustice for centuries. "Your people," Krex said to Sarah as they worked together in the damaged engineering section, "they are extraordinary. Most species would have fled rather than face such odds." Sarah wiped sweat from her brow. "Most species don't come from Deathworlds, I'm guessing." Krex's skin shifted to a deep purple, the Vrixian equivalent of surprise. "Deathworld? Earth is classified as a Deathworld?" "I don't know about classified," Sarah replied, "but it's not exactly a gentle place. We've got predators, natural disasters, diseases, wars. If you can survive on Earth, you can survive pretty much anywhere. Krex stared at her for a long moment, then his skin shifted to a bright gold, the color of amazement.
Do you realize what this means? There are fewer than 50 known Deathworld species in the galaxy.
They are the most feared warriors, the most skilled survivors. And you just rescued us without even knowing what you were capable of. Over the next several hours, as the two ships limped toward a safe harbor, Sarah learned more about the galaxy than humanity had ever dreamed. The Galactic Accords were indeed a real thing, a vast confederation of species that had been exploring space for millennia. But like all governments, it had its share of corruption and abuse of power. The Hegemon Collective, as Fleet Commander Zale had claimed, was one of the most powerful factions within the Accords.
They controlled vast resources and had influence throughout the galaxy.
But Captain Krex and his team had discovered evidence that the Hegemons were using their power to suppress emerging species, keeping them dependent and weak. They fear competition, Krex explained as they sat in the Defiant's damaged conference room. New species, especially those from challenging worlds, tend to be innovative and aggressive.
The Hegemons prefer a galaxy where they remain on top. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. And humanity? Would be seen as a threat, Krex confirmed. A Deathworld species with advanced technology and a proven willingness to fight for others? The Hegemons would want to either control you or eliminate you. But Sarah was already thinking beyond the immediate threat. What about the other species? The ones being suppressed? Krex's skin shifted to a deep blue, the color of hope.
That is where you could change everything. The Accords have rules about interference with developing species. But those rules don't apply to species that make contact on their own terms. By answering our distress call, by choosing to fight for justice, you've established humanity as an independent player in galactic politics.
The implications were staggering.
Humanity had gone from being alone in the universe to being a potential leader in galactic affairs in the space of a few hours.
But with that opportunity came enormous responsibility. We need to get back to Earth, Sarah said. My people need to know what's out here.
They need to prepare. I agree, Krex replied.
But first, we need to make sure the evidence of Hegemon corruption reaches the right people.
There are species within the Accords who have been waiting for proof of what we've discovered. With your testimony about the attack on our ship, we might finally be able to expose the truth. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. The Defiant limped along on emergency power, supported by the Wanderer's more advanced systems. During that time, Sarah and her crew learned everything they could about galactic civilization, while Krex and his team marveled at human ingenuity and adaptability. Your species has an unusual approach to problem solving, Krex observed as he watched Chief Bradley Jury-Rigger repair to the ship's life support system using spare parts and what appeared to be chewing gum.
Most species would wait for proper replacement parts.
Most species probably don't come from a world that tries to kill them every day, Bradley replied with a grin.
On Earth, you learn to make do with what you have. When they finally reached Earth, the reception was unlike anything in human history.
The Defiant was escorted by a fleet of hastily assembled defense ships, while news crews from around the world gathered to witness humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. But the real work was just beginning. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as world leaders, scientists, and military commanders all demanded to know what she'd learned about the galaxy beyond Earth. The situation is complex, she explained to a joint session of the United Nations Security Council.
We've made contact with a vast galactic civilization, but it's not the peaceful utopia we might have hoped for. There are factions, there's corruption, there's conflict. And humanity is about to be thrust into the middle of it all.
The evidence that Captain Krex had gathered about Hegemon corruption was presented to the Galactic Accords Council on Nexus Prime, the Coalition's capital world. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Hegemons had been secretly suppressing dozens of species, keeping them in a state of technological dependence while exploiting their resources.
But the most shocking revelation was the existence of humanity itself.
The Deathworld species that had fought 2 massive Hegemon ships to protect innocent scientists became an overnight sensation throughout the galaxy. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the fearless humans who had appeared from nowhere to challenge the status quo.
"We're calling them the Deathworld Guardians," reported Galactic News Service anchor Prex Zelder.
In less than a day, they've gone from unknown to legendary.
Species throughout the galaxy are asking the same question: if the humans were willing to fight for strangers, what would they do for allies? The answer came sooner than anyone expected.
Within 6 months of the Defiant's return to Earth, humanity had established formal diplomatic relations with 17 different species. The humans offered what they called the Earth Accords, a mutual defense pact that guaranteed protection for any species willing to stand up against oppression. The Vrixians were the first to sign, followed quickly by the Zalari, the Morthak, and the Crystalline Collective. Each species brought their own unique strengths to the alliance: the Vrixians' scientific knowledge, the Zalari's manufacturing capabilities, the Morthak's warrior traditions, and the Crystalline's ability to process information at incredible speeds. But it was the humans who provided the backbone of the alliance. Their Deathworld origins had given them something most galactic species lacked: the ability to adapt quickly to new threats and the willingness to fight against impossible odds. Captain Sarah Chen found herself promoted to Admiral and placed in command of the new Earth Defense Force. The Defiant was repaired and upgraded with the best technology the allied species could provide, becoming the flagship of a growing fleet of human and alien vessels. "The galaxy is changing," she told her crew as they prepared for their first joint mission with their new allies. "For too long, the strong have preyed upon the weak. But now the weak have champions. And we're going to make sure that no one else has to send a distress signal into the void and wonder if anyone will answer." The mission was a rescue operation. A civilian transport carrying refugees from a war-torn system had been attacked by pirates. The ship's distress signal had been picked up by the Alliance's monitoring network, and the response was swift and decisive. The pirates never knew what hit them. The combined fleet of human, Vrixian, Zalari, and Morthak ships arrived at the scene within hours of the distress call. The pirates, expecting to face a helpless transport, instead found themselves confronting a multi-species task force with advanced weaponry and tactics they'd never encountered.
"This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force," Sarah broadcast to the pirate vessels.
"You are in violation of the Galactic Accords and the laws of civilized space.
Release your prisoners immediately and surrender, or face the consequences."
The pirate leader, a reptilian species known for their arrogance, made the mistake of trying to negotiate.
"Human Admiral, you do not understand the complexities of this sector. These refugees are carrying valuable cargo. We are willing to share the profits if you withdraw." Sarah's response was swift and uncompromising. "The only thing we're willing to share is justice. You have 30 seconds to release the prisoners." The pirates chose to fight. It was over in minutes. The combined fleet's tactics, developed from human military doctrine and enhanced by alien technology, proved devastatingly effective. The pirate ships were disabled without a single civilian casualty, and their crews were taken into custody. But the real victory came when the refugee ship's captain, an elderly Bendorian named Thex, knelt before Sarah in the traditional gesture of gratitude. "Admiral," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "my people have been fleeing persecution for generations. We have sent countless distress signals, but no one has ever answered. Today, for the first time, we know we are not alone." Word of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Earth Alliance, as it was now being called, had proven that they meant what they said about protecting the innocent. Within a year, membership in the Alliance had grown to over 50 species, ranging from powerful civilizations to small colonies that had never before had a voice in galactic affairs. But the Hegemon Collective wasn't about to give up their power without a fight. 3 years after first contact, they launched a massive military campaign designed to crush the upstart alliance once and for all. The Hegemons had the advantage of size and established technology, but they had made a crucial mistake: they had underestimated the determination of Deathworld species and their allies. The war that followed would be remembered as the Great Liberation. It lasted for 5 years and spanned dozens of star systems. The Hegemons threw everything they had at the Alliance, from massive battleships to bioweapons to cyber attacks that could cripple entire fleets. But the Alliance had something the Hegemons didn't expect: adaptability. Every new weapon the Hegemons deployed was studied, countered, and eventually turned against them. The humans, with their Deathworld-bred ability to survive in any environment,
often led the charge into the most dangerous situations, while their allies provided the technology and support needed to win. Admiral Chen found herself at the center of the war's most crucial battle. The hegemons had launched a desperate attack on Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Accords. If they could capture the planet and its government, they might be able to legitimize their rule and end the rebellion. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Krex, now serving as Sarah's chief scientific advisor, "our intelligence suggests the hegemons are planning to use a planet-killer weapon on Nexus Prime. If we don't stop them, billions of innocent beings will die." Sarah studied the tactical display showing the hegemon fleet approaching the capital system. Over 1,000 ships, including their most advanced battlecruisers, were converging on the planet. The Alliance fleet was outnumbered 3-1. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast to her forces. "Today, we face our greatest challenge. The enemy wants to destroy everything we've fought to protect. But they've made one crucial mistake: they think that superior numbers guarantee victory. They don't understand that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species that has ever been oppressed, every world that has ever been exploited, every being that has ever sent a distress signal into the void hoping someone would answer." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Alliance fleet, led by the upgraded Defiant, tore through the hegemon lines with a combination of human tactics and alien technology. The humans' willingness to take risks that other species would consider suicidal gave them a crucial advantage, while their allies' advanced weapons and defensive systems kept them alive long enough to make those risks pay off. At the climax of the battle, Admiral Chen made a decision that would echo through galactic history. The hegemon flagship, a massive vessel carrying the planet-killer weapon, was too heavily defended for a conventional attack. But it had one weakness: its weapon had to be charged for several minutes before firing, during which time its shields would be weakened. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship," Sarah ordered. "We need to keep them busy while I get in close." "Admiral, no," protested Captain Rodriguez, now serving as her first officer aboard the Defiant. "Their point defense systems will tear us apart." "Maybe," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "But if we don't try, Nexus Prime dies. And with it, any hope of peace in the galaxy." The Defiant dove toward the hegemon flagship, its hull glowing from the heat of enemy fire. The ship's shields failed, then its armor began to melt away, but still Sarah pressed on. At the last possible moment, she fired everything the ship had directly into the flagship's weapon port. The explosion was visible from orbit. The hegemon flagship's planet-killer weapon detonated inside the ship, destroying it and taking out 3 nearby vessels in the blast. The remaining hegemon fleet, demoralized by the loss of their flagship and facing the relentless assault of the Alliance forces, began to surrender. The war was over. The hegemon collective's power was broken, and their leaders were brought to trial for crimes against sentient beings. The evidence that Captain Krex had gathered years earlier, combined with testimony from dozens of species, painted a picture of systemic oppression and exploitation that had lasted for centuries. But the real victory was what came after. The Galactic Accords were reformed, with new protections for developing species and a commitment to mutual aid that was directly inspired by humanity's example. The Earth Alliance evolved into the Galactic Liberation Front, a permanent organization dedicated to protecting the rights of all sentient beings. Admiral Sarah Chen, now in her 70s, stood on the bridge of the Defiant as it patrolled the outer rim of known space. The old ship had been rebuilt and upgraded so many times that little of the original remained, but it still bore the scars of that first battle so many years ago. "Admiral," came the voice of her current communications officer, a young crystalline named Zephyr, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Andromeda sector. Unknown species, appears to be under attack by raiders." Sarah smiled. Some things never changed. "Plot a course for the Andromeda sector. Maximum warp." "Aye, Admiral." "Should I notify the fleet?" "Not yet," Sarah replied. "Let's see what we're dealing with first. But transmit a message to the distressed vessel. Tell them help is on the way." As the Defiant jumped to warp, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a single distress signal, a call for help from strangers across the galaxy. But it had become something much more, a legacy of hope that would endure for generations. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of predators and tyrants who preyed upon the weak. But it was also full of heroes, beings who would risk everything to answer a call for help, no matter how far away it came from or how impossible the odds seemed. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or domination, but through compassion and courage. They had proven that the strongest species weren't always the ones with the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. Sometimes, the strongest were simply the ones who refused to ignore a cry for help. The Defiant streaked through space toward another crisis, another chance to make a difference. Behind it, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of civilizations rising and falling, of conflicts and resolutions, of despair and hope. But now, whenever a distress signal pulsed through the void, there was a good chance that someone would answer. And often, that someone would be wearing the insignia of the Galactic Liberation Front, the symbol of a Deathworld species that had heard an alien SOS and chosen to act. The legacy was born from a single moment of choice, but it would live forever in the stars. Humanity had come to the galaxy as explorers and become its guardians. They had answered one call for help and created a tradition that would echo through the ages. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the battles won or the enemies defeated, but the simple fact that when someone, somewhere, called out in distress, they could be confident that help would come. The Deathworlders had heeded an alien SOS, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. The Defiant disappeared into the depths of space, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of 1,000 species. The distress signal from the Andromeda sector continued to pulse, but now it carried something it hadn't had before, the promise that it would be answered. And in the vast reaches of the galaxy, other ships were already changing course, other crews were preparing for another rescue mission, another chance to prove that civilization meant more than just technology and power. It meant caring for one another, regardless of species or origin or the distance between the stars.